This wasn't just a marriage. It was a high-stakes battle for my autonomy. Sonia thought I was just a lonely old man, a confused retiree she could easily manipulate. She underestimated one thing. I spent 30 years designing aircraft systems where precision is everything. While she was busy planning my guardianship, I was busy recording her every move. My spouse stepped into my workplace refectory during the peak afternoon congestion and proclaimed with enough volume for every person present to overhear, "Alaric, I am initiating a divorce against you. Your own biological offspring endorse my resolution to claim 50% of every asset." Every former associate looked on as she forcefully thrust legal instruments onto my dining table. "You are forfeiting the residence, the liquid capital, everything. Isla and Julian both concur that you are unworthy of possessing it." I remained composed, offered a singular nod, and uttered softly, "I comprehend." But here is what Sonia failed to perceive. Isla had never voiced any such sentiment. My daughter had been alerting me regarding Sonia's deceptive maneuvers for months, and those children she claimed were on her flank. Julian was her own biological son, not mine. He had been assisting her in orchestrating this strategy from the very first day. What Sonia truly did not anticipate was that I had already shifted every cent to fortified, protected accounts and possessed 6 months of documented vocal interactions establishing her racketeering. By nightfall, when she attempted to gain entry to our capital, she realized the reality struck back with more force than she ever envisioned. But before I disclose precisely how this recoiled on my plotting spouse, let me know in the remarks where you are observing from and the current hour there. And do not neglect to follow for more narratives regarding retribution and renewed opportunities. She entered my aviation refectory during the midday surge and broadcasted loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "Alaric, I am divorcing you. Your own children back my choice to seize half of all possessions." Every former coworker watched as she slammed judicial petitions on my table. "You are losing the manor, the investments, everything. Isla and Julian both agree you lack the merit to keep it." I stayed tranquil, nodded once, and spoke quietly. "I understand. But here is the detail Sonia lacked." Isla never spoke those words. My daughter had been providing me warnings about Sonia's illicit plots for months. And those youths on her side? Julian was her offspring, not of my blood. He had been aiding her in mapping this out since the beginning. What Sonia genuinely did not expect was that I had previously relocated every penny to shielded accounts and held half a year of taped dialogues proving her swindling. By the evening, when she sought to access our funds, she found the truth hit back with more intensity than she could have imagined. But before I narrate exactly how this collapsed on my scheming wife, tell me in the comments where you are watching from and the time of day. And remember to subscribe for more chronicles of equity and second chances. You are pitiful, Alaric, a bewildered senior citizen who cannot even recall where he placed his medication. My wife Sonia's voice sliced through the aviation cafeteria like a blade. She had opted for the lunch hour intentionally, when all my previous professional peers would be present to witness my public social execution. "I am delivering you legal notices right here, right now," she proclaimed, brandishing documents above her cranium like a flag of conquest. "Alaric Vance is psychologically incapable of managing his $1.2 million inheritance. The children have witnessed enough. They are aligned with me entirely." The entire dining hall turned to ice. Conversations perished mid-sentence. Silas Thorne, my former operations director, could not even meet my eyes. 23 aviation retirees watched in stunned silence as the woman I had trusted with my entire existence stripped away my self-respect in the location I had called my professional home for 3 decades. My fingers began to tremble. My chest felt constricted. This was the climax. The instant Sonia had been engineering all along. But then, something within me became entirely serene. "I understand," I uttered quietly, rising with stable limbs. "Thank you for making your stance transparently clear." What Sonia did not realize was that I had been documenting every verbal exchange in our residence for 6 months. Every fabrication, every plot, every word she assumed I was too aged and unintelligent to retain. By 6 p.m. that dusk, she would find that certain seasoned men are far more hazardous than they appear. But before I explain exactly how this 65-year-old technician dismantled his wife's entire conspiracy, let me know in the comments where you are viewing from and the time in your region. And do not forget to subscribe for more accounts of justice and second starts. My name is Alaric Vance, and I am a 65-year-old retired technician who dedicated 30 years to assembling aircraft. I assisted in designing the fluid systems for the heavy jets and the safety protocols for the long-range carriers. I raised a daughter who is currently in medical training. I constructed a life valued at $1.2 million through decades of meticulous preparation and honorable labor. But 8 years ago, the world shifted when my spouse Serafina lost her conflict with cancer. The medical report arrived on a Tuesday in March. Stage 4. The practitioners gave her 6 months. She struggled for 8, resolved to see Isla finish her university degree with her technical credentials. The residents in the suburbs became too silent after the service, too. Every corner contained echoes that both soothed and tormented me. Serafina's beverage mug still rested in the kitchen pantry. Her vision glasses were folded on the bedside table next to her preferred suspense novel, markers still indicating page 247. Isla was occupied with her medical school credentials, studying for the entrance exams, forging her own path. I was proud of her, yet I craved having a companion to share a meal with, someone to inquire about my day, someone to notice if I neglected my cardiac medication. The solitude moved in gradually, like moisture infiltrating small fissures in a base. I would wake every dawn and prepare coffee for one. I would consume dinner observing the evening broadcast alone. The unoccupied chair across from me was a persistent memento of what I had forfeited. Weekends lingered indefinitely. My neighbors were pleasant enough. The garrisons would signal from their lawn. Mrs. Zhao would bring me surplus broth when she prepared too much. But they possessed their own kin, their own frantic lives. I did not wish to be the solitary widower who trespassed on everyone's empathy. I began committing more time to the community center, assisting with their digital literacy curriculum for seniors. That is where I mastered online finance, where I established automated settlements for all my accounts. I was satisfied with how structured I kept my entire world. Serafina used to remark with a gentle and knowing smile that I was methodical to a fault. In her eyes, my world was constructed of blueprints, structural integrity, and fail-safes. As a lead systems engineer who had spent 30 years ensuring that massive aircraft remained airborne against the laws of gravity, I took her observation as the highest form of flattery. I lived by the logic of the slide rule and the precision of the hydraulic press. I never once entertained the prospect of venturing back into the world of romance or considering the possibility of remarrying. Serafina's beverage mug still rested in the kitchen pantry. Her vision glasses were folded on the bedside table next to her preferred suspense novel, markers still indicating page 247. Isla was occupied with her medical school credentials, studying for the entrance exams, forging her own path. I was proud of her, yet I craved having a companion to share a meal with, someone to inquire about my day, someone to notice if I neglected my cardiac medication. The solitude moved in gradually, like moisture infiltrating small fissures in a base. I would wake every dawn and prepare coffee for one. I would consume dinner observing the evening broadcast alone. The unoccupied chair across from me was a persistent memento of what I had forfeited. Weekends lingered indefinitely. My neighbors were pleasant enough. The garrisons would signal from their lawn. Mrs. Zhao would bring me surplus broth when she prepared too much. But they possessed their own kin, their own frantic lives. I did not wish to be the solitary widower who trespassed on everyone's empathy. I began committing more time to the community center, assisting with their digital literacy curriculum for seniors. That is where I mastered online finance, where I established automated settlements for all my accounts. I was satisfied with how structured I kept my entire world. Serafina used to remark with a gentle and knowing smile that I was methodical to a fault. In her eyes, my world was constructed of blueprints, structural integrity, and fail-safes. As a lead systems engineer who had spent 30 years ensuring that massive aircraft remained airborne against the laws of gravity, I took her observation as the highest form of flattery. I lived by the logic of the slide rule and the precision of the hydraulic press. I never once entertained the prospect of venturing back into the world of romance or considering the possibility of remarrying. Serafina and I had shared something truly exceptional, a profound, soul-deep connection that I firmly believed was a singular, once-in-a-lifetime occurrence. When she passed, I expected to spend the remainder of my twilight years in the quiet company of my memories and the pride I felt for our daughter's achievements. Then, the trajectory of my life shifted on a saturated, overcast Thursday morning. I encountered Sonia at the local coffee establishment on the primary boulevard. The Pacific Northwest rain was drumming a rhythmic, persistent beat against the glass panes as I stepped inside, seeking the simple comfort of a morning brew. Sonia was positioned in isolation at a peripheral corner table, her presence radiating a polished, professional allure. She was engrossed in what appeared to be complex fiscal records, her brow slightly furrowed in concentration as she sipped a latte. She was undeniably attractive, possessing golden tresses styled with impeccable precision and wearing garments that whispered of wealth and status without being garishly ostentatious. Her cosmetics were applied with the surgical accuracy of a high-end consultant, and she carried herself with a confident, upright posture that signaled an individual entirely at home in the high-stakes environments of corporate banking and estate management. The moment that altered everything was purely accidental, or so I believed at the time. As she reached for her beverage, she inadvertently brushed against a stack of papers, causing them to cascade and drift across the polished tile floor like autumn leaves. My engineering instincts, rooted in order and the correction of chaos, kicked in immediately. I transitioned from my place in the queue to assist her in reclaiming the scattered documents. As I gathered the heavy bond paper, I could not help but observe the headings: diversified investment portfolios, intricate estate frameworks, and tax-sheltered trust documents. These were the specific varieties of high-level fiscal planning materials that the average person would find paralyzing or utterly intimidating, yet she handled them with the casual ease of a seasoned pro. "I am truly, deeply grateful for your assistance," she expressed, looking up at me with a luminous, radiant smile that seemed to reach the very depths of her gaze. "I am Sonia. I serve as a senior wealth consultant at the central bank branch downtown. I'm afraid I let my work follow me into my breakfast hour." "Alaric Vance," I replied, extending my hand and noting the impressive vigor and firmness of her handshake. "I am a retired specialist, formerly of the aviation sector." We commenced with the standard, safe trivialities regarding the relentless climate and the quality of the coffee, but the dialogue rapidly evolved into much weightier and more substantial subjects. She appeared profoundly, genuinely intrigued when I admitted, perhaps with a vulnerability I rarely showed, that I was still acclimating to the hollow silence of a solitary existence. I confessed that I was still attempting to navigate the labyrinthine logistical burdens and domestic management that Serafina had handled entirely during our 38 years together. Sonia was a master of the art of the inquiry. She posed insightful, thoughtful questions regarding my extensive tenure at the aviation firm, the complexities of the Boeing pension frameworks, and my personal methodology for managing wealth in my seniority. Her questioning never felt like an interrogation. Rather, it felt organic, professional, and empathetic, the exact variety of inquiries a seasoned consultant would utilize to comprehend a prospective client's unique status. "Your retirement benefits must be exceptional," she remarked, shifting forward slightly and narrowing her eyes with professional interest. "Aviation corporations prioritize their veterans, especially engineers of your caliber and experience. 30 years of dedicated contribution equates to a massive pension structure and a very comfortable legacy." In the warmth of that conversation, I found myself disclosing far more personal information than I typically would to a total stranger. She possessed a specific, almost hypnotic manner of listening that validated my presence and made me feel perceived in a way I hadn't felt since the funeral. She signaled her understanding at precise intervals with a soft nod and asked supplementary questions that demonstrated she was truly, deeply focused on my words. When she mentioned, with a slight dip in her voice, that she was a divorcee with a son currently navigating the challenges of higher education, I felt an unexpected bond of shared experience. Here was a fellow survivor of life's unpredictable storms who grasped the sheer difficulty of reconstructing a life after the very foundations of your world simply evaporate. "It is grueling, is it not?" she murmured, her hand momentarily grazing mine over the grain of the wooden table. "Acquiring the skill to rebuild a life after everything you deemed permanent and solid simply disappears without warning." That fleeting physical contact surged through me with an intensity one hadn't experienced since the early days of Serafina's decline. Over the following month, we congregated for coffee on 3 additional occasions. Each encounter felt more instinctive, more serene, and more like a return to a life I thought was over. Sonia consistently inquired about the minutiae of my daily routine, my health habits, and my long-term objectives for my retirement years. She recounted fascinating tales of the banking world and of assisting individuals in structuring their estates for peak tax efficiency and maximum growth. She made the concept of retirement sound like a grand, daring expedition rather than a slow, stagnant wait for the inevitable end. She spoke of global journeys, luxury cruises, and sophisticated investment tactics that could finance passions and experiences I had never even entertained during my working years. "Do you know why I truly appreciate working with retirees?" she asked during our 4th engagement, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "You have earned the privilege of enjoying your prosperity. You have paid your dues to the world. Too many people in your demographic simply stagnate their wealth, park their money in low-interest accounts, and wait for the end. That is not truly living. That is merely existing." On our 5th rendezvous, she voiced something that should have served as a glaring red flag, though at the time, filtered through the lens of my loneliness, it sounded like genuine, caring concern. "You know, Alaric, intelligent and successful people like us should maintain a protective alliance. There are countless swindlers and predators targeting seniors in this city lately." She spoke with great authority of fiscal predators who analyze vulnerable individuals, memorize their patterns, and manipulate their confidence through elaborate schemes. I assumed she was acting as my guardian and protector. I firmly believed she truly cared for my security and long-term well-being. She discussed tragic cases of elderly clients who had been exploited by unscrupulous relatives, by romantic partners who vanished into the night with their life savings, or by incompetent consultants who slowly bled their accounts dry through hidden costs and poor investment selections. "The most tragic element of all," she noted, stirring her drink contemplatively as her expression turned somber, "is that these targets are often too humiliated to report the crime to the authorities. They fault themselves for being gullible, for trusting the incorrect individual, but it is not their failing. These predators are master manipulators, professionals who know exactly which heartstrings to pull." I was captivated by her every word, hanging on her every sentence as if she were delivering the secret to survival. Here was an expert who understood the specific hazards I encountered as an aging widower with significant capital. Someone who could assist me in navigating the labyrinth of wealth management in my retirement. When she proposed we move from casual coffee shop meetings to a formal dinner at a genuine restaurant, I felt like a nervous youth pursuing his first romantic interest. I selected a refined, high-end seafood establishment in the city center, the same location where Serafina and I had commemorated our anniversaries for decades. The irony of the choice was not lost on me even then. I was utilizing a sacred location from my first marriage to inaugurate a new chapter. But Sonia had a way of making it feel as though I was honoring Serafina's legacy by being happy again, rather than replacing her. She spoke of Serafina with a respect that felt earned. 6 months later, we were wed at the city courthouse downtown in a quiet ceremony. It was a modest, understated ritual. Just Sonia, myself, the official, and 2 witnesses Sonia had secured through her professional banking circle. My daughter, Isla, was unable to travel from her medical training site in the north. She claimed her clinical rotations were too demanding to permit her absence that week, citing the rigors of her residency. I was saddened and felt a pang of guilt, but Sonia reassured me with a gentle touch, insisting we would host a grander, more inclusive celebration once Isla's professional obligations diminished. "Children require time to process transition and major life changes," Sonia whispered, clutching my hand as we legalized the union. "She will align with us once she observes our shared joy and the stability we have found together. Julian, Sonia's 22-year-old son, relocated into our suburban home immediately following the nuptials. He was a tall, gangly youth with a distant expression who occupied the majority of his time in the lower level. He had moved in with an elaborate digital gaming rig that must have cost thousands of dollars, paid for by Sonia's hard-earned bonuses. When I attempted to initiate any form of fatherly dialogue or shared interest, he would offer nothing but monosyllabic grunts without ever detaching his gaze from the glowing monitor. "Give him space and time," Sonia explained when I mentioned his distant, almost cold behavior. "He is still reconciling with his biological father's desertion. The divorce was traumatic for him. His father simply vanished one day, never sends support, never calls, never acknowledges his existence. I understood the weight of familial trauma and the scars it leaves behind. I deeply desired to be the type of stepfather who offered consistency, who modeled what a dependable and present male figure looked like. Consequently, I did not press him or demand his respect. I simply remained unfailingly kind, accessible, and supportive. The initial month of the marriage was a period of absolute bliss. Sonia prepared complex, multi-course meals every evening, restructured the kitchen for better ergonomic flow, and recommended we integrate our finances for maximum fiscal benefits. "It is simply prudent modern strategy," she claimed, spreading banking records and legal forms across the dining table like a corporate briefing. "Joint titles, shared ownership, and unified portfolios. That is the hallmark of a successful, trusting partnership. It demonstrates absolute confidence and simplifies the complexities of tax obligations and estate transfers." I gave her my total, unwavering trust. She was a banking professional. She grasped these mechanisms and the fine print far better than I ever could. When she suggested adding her name to the property deed of the house I had shared with Serafina, it seemed not only logical but sentimental, a badge of our unified future. When she urged me to grant her power of attorney for all fiscal choices, she framed it as a necessity for emergency preparedness. "What if an unforeseen incident occurs while I am at my office and you are home alone?" she asked, her voice brimming with what seemed like authentic, deep-seated worry. "What if you suffer a sudden health crisis and I require immediate, unimpeded access to funds for your specialized treatment? What if there are time-critical investment choices that need to be addressed while you are incapacitated?" Her logic was impenetrable and perfectly aligned with my own engineering mindset regarding redundancy and fail-safes. Serafina and I had never required formal legal proxies because we made every choice in person over 40 years of total transparency. But Sonia and I were starting anew, and she possessed a technical, legal mastery I lacked. I endorsed every document she placed before me with a steady hand. Joint house deeds, shared accounts with her name listed as the primary administrator, massive asset transfers, a new life insurance policy naming Sonia as the sole, irrevocable recipient. "This is the definition of a true modern alliance," she said, witnessing my signature on the final page. Total clarity, total faith. Looking back through the clarity of hindsight, I realize I was so desperate for companionship, so relieved not to wake to the crushing silence of an empty house, that I ignored every warning sign fluttering in the wind. I ignored the speed with which she identified necessary papers. I ignored her connections at the bank to accelerate transfers. I ignored her hyperspecific inquiries about my pension schedule and the exact dates of my Social Security deposits. But in those early weeks, it felt like a second blooming of affection. It felt as though someone finally cared enough to lift the heavy burden of management from my tired shoulders. Sonia injected a new vitality into the house. She shifted the furniture to optimize the flow of energy, installed curtains that welcomed the sun, and gradually moved Serafina's mementos to less visible areas. "We must make this our shared residence," she explained when I found Serafina's wedding portrait carefully stored in a cabinet. "Clinging to the past is unhealthy for both of us, Alaric. Serafina would want you to find happiness, to progress, and to live in the present." I understood the rationale, but the sting remained. Those images were my bridge to 38 years of history. But I wanted this union to thrive. I wanted to prove I could love again, build again, and trust again. The first 90 days of the marriage felt like a miraculous second opportunity. Sonia brought order and intent back to my schedule. She tracked my medical appointments with a calendar on the fridge, prompted me to take my cardiac pills every morning, and hired a professional maintenance crew so I wouldn't have to labor in the rain. Sonia assumed control of all domestic finances with an efficiency that rivaled my own technical blueprints. She automated our transfers and organized everything in color-coded, labeled files. "You don't need to concern yourself with this administrative bureaucracy anymore," she said, tapping the bank reports. "I will manage the capital. You just focus on your leisure. Perhaps pursue the interests you delayed during your career." For the first time in nearly a decade, I felt truly supported. Sonia anticipated my pharmacy needs, managed the car's upkeep, and ensured our insurance was synchronized. Julian seemingly grew accustomed to me, or at least grew comfortable in the shared space of the home. He would join us for occasional meals, though he rarely looked away from his phone long enough to contribute. When I offered to assist him with employment or community college, Sonia intervened quickly. "He is on a sabbatical to find his path," she stated firmly. "Not everyone progresses at the same speed, Alaric. Julian needs time to process his father's exit before he can commit to a career." I didn't challenge it. I wanted to be a respectful stepfather, but I observed things that didn't fit the narrative. Julian's high-end tech, his designer fashion, and his casual mentions of moving to a private apartment as if funds were infinite. Eventually, the atmosphere shifted. Sonia became clinical about our bond, prioritizing logistics over intimacy. Our dialogues transitioned from aspirations to invoices and administrative minutiae. The intimate dinners ceased. Sonia would return late from the bank with commercial food rather than the meals she once crafted. When I proposed a vacation, she claimed we needed to prioritize wealth consolidation over luxuries. "We must discuss your testament," she said one evening over takeout. As a married couple, everything should reflect our new family and financial status. She had already consulted a legal associate, an estate specialist. The proposed will left everything to her, with minor provisions for Julian and Isla only after her own passing. "It is more streamlined this way," she explained. "No ambiguity, no familial conflict. Isla will receive her portion through me later, and Julian gains the stability he has lacked." Something felt fundamentally incorrect in the pit of my stomach, but her logic seemed sound to my logical mind. She was my spouse. In traditional unions, spouses inherit. Isla was young and occupied with her medical journey. Julian was struggling. I endorsed the updated will on a Tuesday in the office of Sonia's legal friend. The man was cordial, though he focused entirely on Sonia rather than explaining the nuances to me. "Simply endorse here, here, and initial there," he instructed. "Your wife has outlined the terms accurately. This is the most efficient framework for your family." I walked out of that office feeling like a man who had secured his future. I had no idea I had just signed the warrant for my own social and financial execution. What Sonia did not realize, what her greedy, calculating mind could not possibly fathom, was that an engineer never truly stops analyzing. The moment the medication she provided started making me feel groggy rather than healthy, the old systems architect within me surged back to life. I didn't confront her. That would have been a tactical error. Instead, I began a 6-month deep dive into the very systems she thought she controlled. I utilized my knowledge of Boeing's emergency protocols to set up my own domestic black box. I installed hidden, high-fidelity recording devices in the study, the kitchen, and the living room. I captured every whispered conversation between Sonia and Julian. I heard them laughing about the old man's dwindling checking account. I heard them discussing the gap year that was actually funded by my stolen savings. Most importantly, I heard Sonia admit that she had intercepted my daughter Isla's letters and calls, telling her that I was too confused to speak to her. While she was at the bank, I was at the library, using the digital literacy skills she thought were basic to navigate the blockchain and move my liquid assets into a series of multi-signature trusts. These trusts required 2 biometrics to open, mine and Isla's. By the time Sonia walked into that cafeteria to humiliate me, She wasn't just divorcing a confused old man. She was divorcing a man who had already deleted her from his life's ledger. That nightfall, I initiated a telephonic conversation with Isla to inform her regarding the modifications to my final testament. The dialogue with Isla did not proceed favorably at all. "Father, are you entirely certain about this specific path?" she inquired, her tone constricted with profound anxiety. "You scarcely know Sonia. Why would you grant her absolute authority over every asset that you and mother constructed together across 38 years of matrimony? She is my spouse now, Isla. This is the conduct of committed partners. We arrive at conclusions together. We orchestrate our future as a unit." There was a protracted silence on the line. I could perceive her academic work in the distance, the sound of parchment rustling, the friction of her highlighter across medical textbook pages. "This is uncharacteristic of you, Father. You have consistently been so cautious with capital, so systematic regarding significant choices. Do you recall how you investigated vehicles for half a year before purchasing your sedan? Yet now, you are assigning your entire legacy to someone you have known for less than 12 months. Her statements stung because they held a reality I was reluctant to admit. I had been meticulous regarding fiscal choices my entire adult existence. Serafina and I had spent weeks investigating every substantial acquisition, every asset selection, and every insurance policy adjustment. "I am not merely handing everything over," I remarked in a defensive tone. "It remains my testament. Sonia simply inherits the estate upon my passing, which is standard procedure for wedded pairs. Father, you are 65 years of age and in good health. You could persist for another 2 or 3 decades. A great deal can transform in that span of time. What if this union does not endure? What if Sonia is not the individual you perceive her to be?" I experienced a spark of irritation at my daughter's doubt regarding my discernment, my capability to select a life companion, and my power to arrive at my own conclusions. "Isla, I require you to have faith in me regarding this. Sonia provides me with joy. She attends to my needs. After 8 years of isolation, I finally possess companionship once more. I assumed you would be gratified that I am not spending my retirement secluded and sorrowful." We terminated the call on an uncomfortable note, with Isla pledging to contemplate the situation and me feeling guarded about choices I had been entirely certain of just hours prior. That evening, Sonia inquired how Isla had reacted to the information. "She requires a period to acclimate," I stated, omitting Isla's precise anxieties. "Naturally, she does," Sonia answered fluently. "Transition is always challenging for offspring." Over the subsequent months, I detected modifications in our banking records that did not quite harmonize when I attempted to match them with my internal budget logs. Substantial withdrawals for capital ventures that Sonia managed exclusively through her professional network. New credit instruments in both our names that I had no recollection of requesting, with debts that appeared to expand every month. When I questioned specific movements of money, Sonia always possessed plausible clarifications. She was diversifying our assets to safeguard against market changes, utilizing time-critical prospects that demanded immediate movement, and forging fiscal protection for our future through methods I did not entirely grasp. "Have faith in me," she would whisper, pressing a kiss to my brow as if I were a youth inquiring about adult choices. "I perform this for my profession, Alaric. I understand how to make capital function for individuals." Julian suddenly possessed superior attire, a fresh digital gaming station that must have cost several thousand, and spoke casually about securing his own residence in one of the high-priced districts near the city center. When I questioned Sonia about funding his lifestyle, she maintained it was merely transitory aid. "He is my biological son," she stated firmly. "I cannot simply desert him because I entered a new marriage. He requires steadiness and assistance while he determines his professional path." "Would you not perform the same for Isla if she required help?" I grasped the concept of family devotion. I had been aiding Isla through her medical schooling, settling her tuition and living costs without hesitation. However, the arithmetic did not feel accurate. We were dispersing significantly more than my retirement pay and Social Security generated each month. My efforts to examine our wealth more intimately were greeted with soft but resolute opposition. Sonia would touch my hand and remind me that wealth management was burdensome, that I had essentially employed her to manage these intricate details so I could relish my retirement. "You have labored sufficiently for one lifetime," she would remark. "Allow me to attend to you now. That is the duty of a spouse." However, late into the night, when Sonia assumed I was slumbering, I would overhear her on the telephone with an individual, speaking in hushed, hurried tones regarding schedules, judicial protocols, and filing mandates. Once, near 2 o'clock in the morning, I heard her utter a phrase that sent a chill through my soul. "The capacity assessment must be recorded correctly. We cannot accelerate this segment." I remained in bed, my pulse thundering, attempting to persuade myself I had misheard or misinterpreted her. Perhaps she was discussing a client at the bank, assisting someone else in navigating elder care choices for a relative. When I sought to mention it the following dawn, Sonia maintained I must have overheard her conversing with a colleague regarding a challenging situation at the firm. We had an elderly patron whose kin were anxious about his clarity. She clarified over breakfast. "I was seeking advice from our legal department regarding proper conduct. You realize how gravely we view our fiduciary duty." But the narrative felt practiced, too frictionless, and it did not explain the emotion I had detected in her voice. It did not sound like a professional talk, but like personal strategizing. Isla contacted me less frequently. When we did converse, the interactions were increasingly forced. She would pose sharp questions regarding my daily habits, whether I was governing my own matters, and whether I felt coerced regarding any fiscal choices. "Father, are you certain you are at ease with how much authority Sonia possesses over your accounts?" she inquired during one notably strained call. "Isla, I am not a child. I can arrive at my own conclusions regarding my existence and my capital." "I realize you can, Father, but are you arriving at your own conclusions, or is Sonia arriving at them for you?" The inquiry lingered in my mind for days. I began dedicating more attention to our daily dialogues, to the way Sonia offered options to me. She never overtly commanded me on what to perform, but she had a method of structuring choices that made one path seem obviously correct, while others appeared foolish or hazardous. "We should likely unify your retirement funds," she would remark. "Numerous accounts generate unnecessary complication and increased costs. Perhaps we should contemplate a reverse loan to release some home value," she would suggest. "At your age, it is logical to enjoy your capital while you are sufficiently healthy to explore the world." Each proposition arrived with professional-sounding logic that I could not effectively dispute without deep investigation I no longer felt capable of performing. Everything transformed the night I discovered Sonia's handbag open on the kitchen surface. She was in the shower, and her mobile device kept vibrating with text alerts from an individual named Marcus. Without a conscious choice, I looked down and observed a tan folder protruding from her leather bag. My fingers quivered as I extracted the documents from within. The primary page made my blood turn to ice. "Petition for legal guardianship due to diminished mental capacity. Alaric Vance." The document was nearly finalized, completed in Sonia's meticulous script. It mentioned concerns regarding my growing bewilderment about fiscal matters, my social withdrawal, and my susceptibility to flawed choices. There were minute notes regarding my daily habits, my prescriptions, and my recent unstable conduct regarding capital management. Attached were what seemed to be witness testimonials, though I could not conceive who would have offered them. There were mentions of occurrences I did not recall, and dialogues I was positive had never transpired. At the base was a professional card for an attorney I had never encountered, an individual who specialized in senior law and guardianship cases. There were handwritten comments in the borders regarding filing cutoffs and mandated medical assessments. My chest felt constricted, as if someone had tightened metal cords around my breathing. I could perceive my pulse in my ears. I could feel perspiration appearing on my brow despite the chilly evening climate. This woman I had wed, this woman I believed in with every asset I owned, was plotting to have me proclaimed legally powerless so she could acquire total authority over my existence and wealth. When Sonia descended the stairs 10 minutes later, her hair still moist from the shower and wearing the silk garment I had purchased for our 3-month milestone. I was seated at the kitchen table with the records displayed in front of me. "What is the meaning of this?" I inquired, my voice unexpectedly firm despite the turmoil in my heart. She halted in the doorway as if she had collided with an unseen barrier. Her expression transitioned through shock, resentment, and strategy, finally resting on something resembling fake sympathy. "Alaric," she murmured softly, "I discovered those records at the office. A coworker requested that I examine them as samples of the variety of situations we encounter. They are merely templates." But I perceived the reality in her gaze before she had even finished building the fabrication. "We must discuss this tomorrow," she stated, moving toward me with her palms open as if she were nearing a startled creature. "When we are both less heated, when we can talk about this logically." But I was finished being governed, finished being handled, and finished being viewed like a muddled senior who could not comprehend his own plight. "No," I stated, rising and collecting the parchment into a tidy pile. "We must talk about this immediately tonight. While you still believe you can persuade me these are merely office samples." Sonia's facade vanished for just a heartbeat, and I detected something freezing and calculating beneath the anxious spouse character she had been performing for months. "Alaric, you are reacting too strongly. You are muddled regarding what those records signify. Allow me to clarify." "I am muddled?" I cut her off, my voice escalating for the initial time in our union. "I constructed aviation fluid systems for 30 years. I governed million-dollar project budgets. I raised a daughter who is becoming a physician. Yet I am too muddled to interpret a legal petition with my own name on it." She attempted a different tactic, moving nearer and reaching for my hand. "Dearest, I realize this looks unfavorable, but you must have faith in me. I would never perform anything to harm you. I cherish you." But the word cherish sounded vacant now, like a performer reciting lines in a drama she had ceased to care about. The subsequent dawn, Sonia was gone. No message, no clarification, no farewell. Her vehicle was absent from the path, and the majority of her attire was missing from our bedroom storage. The bathroom surface, which had been packed with her costly lotions and cosmetics, was suddenly vacant, except for my own few items. Julian claimed he had no knowledge of where she had vanished, but he shunned eye contact when he uttered it. He spent the day stuffing his items into refuse bags and boxes, moving with the speed of someone who realized the situation was about to become much worse. "This entire ordeal is truly broken," he remarked, not quite meeting my gaze as he placed his gaming gear into a friend's truck. For 3 days, I sat in that vacant residence, trying to grasp what I had overlooked, what indicators I had brushed aside, and what I had performed to merit this betrayal. I contacted Sonia's office, but they stated she had taken an urgent leave. I contacted her sister, but the woman claimed she had not heard from Sonia in months. The silence was deafening after months of Sonia's constant noise, her governing energy, and her handling of every detail of our daily life. The house felt like a tomb. I found myself opening storage units just to observe the vacant areas where her items had been, trying to figure out how much of our life together had been a lie. On the 4th day, Julian finalized his packing and informed me he was relocating with associates in the city. "I am truly regretful, Alaric," he stated, leaving his entry key on the kitchen surface where Sonia used to organize our daily correspondence. "I never desired any of this to occur. I required a residence, and my mother stated everything would function perfectly." He paused at the main entrance, gazing back at me with a look that might have been true sadness. "For what it's worth, I think you're a great tech expert. You're a good geek. You deserve a better life than this one." After he walked away, the residence became totally quiet, except for the usual noises that had been there before Sonia arrived. The fridge making its low hum, the heating unit turning on and off, the large clock in the hall marking seconds with mechanical exactness. I phoned Isla that night, my pride finally crushed enough to confess I needed some support. "Father," she answered right away, her voice tight with stress. "Are you okay? I've been trying to call you for several days." "Sonia is gone," I said, and the whole story came rushing out. The papers, the money changes, the lies, the guardianship request, everything I'd been too proud or too mixed up to see clearly. Isla drove down from her medical school the next morning, quitting her hospital work for the weekend to help me fix the mess of my money and my poor choices. Isla and I spent many hours looking through bank records, checking legal papers, and trying to see the full plan of what Sonia had done and what she wanted to do next. The story that came out was planned, professional, and very scary. "Father," Isla said softly, putting money papers across the dining table where Sonia used to manage our home budget. "I think Sonia was planning to take everything you own. The mental check, the will changes, the money control. This is a classic pattern of tricking an older person." And she showed me papers she'd found on the internet about money predators who target people who recently lost a spouse. She showed me the warning signs I'd missed and the legal tricks these criminals use to get control over a victim's things. "They call it a sweetheart scam," Isla explained to me. "The person studies the victim, learns their habits and weak spots, then builds a romance made specifically to steal their money." I looked at my daughter, this smart young woman who was going to be a doctor, and felt bad that she understood what I'd been too lonely to see. "How could I have been so foolish?" I asked. "You weren't foolish, Father. You were sad and lonely, and Sonia is clearly very good at tricking people. This isn't your fault." But it felt like my fault. It felt like I'd failed Serafina's memory, put Isla's future at risk, and proved that I really was too simple and confused to run my own life. Then my phone made a sound. The screen showed Sonia's number. "Alaric, we need to meet," she said. Her voice was cold and like a boss, totally different from the kind, caring voice she'd used when we were dating and first married. "I have some things to talk about regarding our money situation." She told me to meet at Luigi's restaurant downtown, a place we had never visited together. "It's a neutral place," she said. She told me I should come alone. Isla wanted to go with me, but I said this was something I had to do by myself. "If she's planning something in a public place," Isla said, "it's because she thinks you'll be too embarrassed to fight back. Don't let her scare you, Father." I knew she was right, but when I walked into Luigi's restaurant and saw Silas Thorne, my old manager from the airplane company, sitting at his usual Tuesday table, I realized I'd been tricked again. Sonia knew Silas would be there. She had picked this restaurant at this time specifically, because she wanted a witness for what was about to happen. Silas smiled and waved me over to sit with him, not knowing he was about to be part of Sonia's latest trick. We were halfway through talking about the old days at the company, laughing about the hard times we had building new jet systems when Sonia showed up. She looked different than she had when we were living together. She looked harder, more formal. She was wearing a dark suit and holding a large folder. She had the look she probably used when telling bank customers bad news. "Alaric," she said loudly enough for the other tables to hear, "I'm glad Silas is here to hear this talk." My stomach felt sick. Whatever was coming, she wanted people to watch. She wanted Silas to see me be shamed. "I've been talking with doctors and legal experts about your mental state," she stated, pulling papers out of the folder like she was giving a court order. "This is official proof that you are no longer mentally healthy enough to manage your money." The restaurant seemed to go silent. The normal sounds of lunch talk and forks hitting plates faded away. I could feel other people turning to look at our table. I could feel them wondering about the drama in their quiet lunch spot. Silas looked very uncomfortable, clearly wanting to be anywhere else. An older couple at the next table stopped eating and just stared at what they thought was a family fight in public. My hands felt cold and shaky. My mouth went totally dry. The usual sounds of the restaurant, the coffee machine, quiet talks, the laughs from the bar, seemed loud and far away at the same time. "Alaric Vance is no longer able to manage his $1.2 million estate," Sonia shouted. "I have legal papers right here," Sonia went on. Her voice was loud across the room like she was giving a speech to bank bosses. "And all the children agree with this choice." Those words hit me very hard in the chest. I felt my face turn red with shame as she waved the papers in the air like proof in a court case. Silas looked very upset, not knowing if he should stay or leave to give us privacy. Other customers tried not to look, but I could feel their eyes on me. I could hear them whispering about the confused old man who had lost his mind. My hands shook against the table. My mouth felt like it was full of dry cotton. The sounds of the room, clinking forks, low voices, the sound of the espresso machine, seemed to echo in my head like I was underwater. "A professional medical check shows he is confused and makes bad choices," she stated, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear clearly. "Alaric Vance can no longer be trusted with his own money." I wanted to hide under the floor. I wanted to wake up from this bad dream. I thought about Serafina, about how proud she'd been of the money we saved through years of planning and hard work. How would she feel seeing me shamed like this in a public place? Silas moved around in his chair, wishing he'd picked a different place for lunch. The older couple at the next table had stopped eating completely. They were staring at us like we were a TV show. Sonia put the papers down with a loud thud, like a lawyer finishing a case. "The children agree that we must step in now to protect him and protect his money." That was the moment something inside me finally broke out of the shame that had made me frozen. Children. Isla had never said anything like that. Isla had warned me about Sonia from the very start. She had been worried about our fast marriage and the money plans. And Julian? Julian wasn't my child. He was Sonia's son, and he had barely talked to me in months unless he wanted cash. I looked up at Sonia. I really looked at her for the first time since she started this act. I saw something I'd been too lonely to notice before. This wasn't her being worried. This wasn't love or being concerned for me. This was a planned public shaming meant to make me feel so bad and confused that I would just do whatever she wanted. But I wasn't confused anymore. I was very angry. I stood up slowly. My legs were stronger than I thought they would be. The whole restaurant was watching now. They were waiting to see if the old man would cry or fight back. "I see," I said quietly. My voice was clear and louder than her shouting. "Thank you for making your plans so clear." Then I turned around and walked out of the restaurant. My back was straight and my head was held high. I didn't run. I didn't trip. I didn't give Sonia or the people watching the fun of seeing me fall apart. But I wasn't beaten. Not anymore. I was finished being a victim. I drove home in total silence. My hands held the steering wheel with a strong grip instead of shaking with fear. The shame still hurt, but under it was something else. It was something cold and sharp that I hadn't felt since my first days at the airplane company. Back then, we had to fix engineering problems that seemed impossible until we broke them down into small parts. The house felt different when I walked inside. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like it had a purpose. It felt like a workshop where important work was starting. I went right to my home office. I opened the cabinet where I kept my most important papers. Everything was there just like I'd put it months ago. Every bank paper, every legal page Sonia had asked me to sign, every record of every cent spent since our wedding. But more importantly, I opened my laptop. I checked the safety software I'd put on it 6 months ago, right after Isla told me about the dangers for seniors with money. Because here is what Sonia didn't know. I'd been recording everything for the past 6 months. I didn't do it because I suspected Sonia specifically at first. I did it because Isla taught me about scams against seniors, and I decided to protect myself early. The safety system automatically saved every talk that happened in our house to a private internet server. It had extra backups so no data was lost. Every late-night phone call Sonia thought I couldn't hear. Every talk with Julian about dates and when they would get the old man's money. Every talk with her lawyer friend about mental checks and legal ways to get guardianship. I had it all saved on the computer, sorted by date and time. I looked through hours of audio files for the specific talks I remembered. There was Sonia talking to someone named Marcus about the old man, and how he won't know what happened until it's too late. There was Julian asking when my accounts would be open for him to pay for his apartment and car. And there it was, the talk that would end this for good. Sonia and her lawyer friend talking about how to get fake medical papers and fake witness stories to support their guardianship case. "We need at least 3 times where he was confused or made a bad choice," the lawyer had said. "Bank workers who can say he acted weird, neighbors who saw bad things, maybe a doctor who will say his mind is failing." "That's not a problem," Sonia had answered. I can make those situations happen easily. Alaric trusts me completely. I sat in my quiet office, listening to my wife and her friend plan to ruin my name, steal my money, and lock me away in a place where I'd have no freedom. But they'd made one huge mistake. They thought I was an easy target. Tomorrow morning, I would call Patricia Wells, the lawyer who had helped with Serafina's estate years ago. Tonight, I would copy all the audio files to many safe places. I would make a full timeline of Sonia's lies. For the first time in a long time, I felt like myself. I wasn't a confused old man or a victim. I was an engineer fixing a hard problem with exact steps. I called Patricia Wells first thing Wednesday morning. Patricia had managed Serafina's estate and our taxes for a long time. I trusted her totally. She said she would see me right away when I told her how serious it was. Alaric, I'm so sorry this happened, she said after I played the recordings of Sonia's talks. But I have to tell you, what Sonia tried to do is fraud and elder abuse. These are serious crimes. We spent 4 hours putting proof together into a big file. The fake medical papers, the money moves Sonia made without my permission, the recordings of Sonia and Julian planning to take everything once I was locked away. The good news, Patricia said, looking at the papers, is that you still own everything. Sonia only had permission to act for you, but she didn't own your stuff. We can cancel that permission right now and lock her out of all your accounts. She called my bank while I sat there. She told them their client was a victim of fraud and needed to save his money right away. Within 2 hours, Sonia's access to our joint accounts was stopped until a full check was done. What about the residents? I questioned, my voice gaining a resonance and strength I hadn't felt in months. My mind was already racing through the structural implications of our living arrangement. Joint tenancy and shared deeds can be legally dissolved by either party when there's clear, documented evidence of fraud or criminal intent. Patricia explained with a reassuring, professional nod as she adjusted her glasses. We'll file the emergency petition paperwork today. Once we present this audio evidence and the forged documents to a judge, Sonia will have no legal claim to your property, your land, or the roof over your head. She also assisted me in drafting an entirely new last will and testament, a document that felt like a shield. I named Isla as my sole, irrevocable beneficiary, explicitly excluding Sonia from any possible inheritance. I included a detailed, several-page addendum documenting the exact reasons for this exclusion, every lie, every theft, and every manipulation. The most important call of the afternoon was to Detective Sarah Chun at the Bellevue Police Department. Financial crimes against the elderly were a specialized priority for their high-impact unit, and Patricia had worked with her on several similar cases involving professional predators. We'll need you to come in and file a formal, sworn complaint with all the supporting evidence you've gathered, Detective Chun explained over the speakerphone, her voice calm but firm. But with this level of high-quality documentation and the recordings you've secured, we can definitely pursue heavy criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and attempted financial elder abuse. For the first time in nearly a year, I felt powerful instead of powerless. I was finally proactive instead of merely reactive. I was the engineer again, fixing a system that had been sabotaged from within. That evening, Sonia returned home as if the world were still turning exactly according to her plan. She walked through the front door around 6 p.m., the chime of the door echoing through the silent house. She was carrying takeout bags from the Thai restaurant we'd enjoyed together during our brief, deceptive courtship period, a calculated move to trigger a sense of nostalgia and warmth. I thought we could have a quiet dinner and talk rationally about this morning's conversation, she said, setting the food containers on the granite kitchen counter with the same casual, practiced confidence she displayed throughout our marriage. I know the scene at the restaurant was difficult and embarrassing for you, Alaric, but it really is for the best. It's about your long-term safety. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the very heart of the home I had built with Serafina, with my laptop open and a legal pad covered with handwritten notes and timelines. She glanced at my setup, her eyes flickering with a momentary curiosity, but she didn't seem truly concerned. To her, I was still the confused old man who couldn't possibly be mounting a defense. Sonia, I said. My voice as calm and steady as a pilot's during turbulence. We definitely need to talk. She sat down across from me, arranging the takeout containers between us, acting as if this were just another normal dinner conversation between a loving couple working through a minor disagreement. "I've spoken with my legal counsel today," I continued in the same steady, project manager tone I'd used during high-stakes Boeing meetings. "The fraudulent papers you filed regarding my mental capacity are being formally contested in court as of 3 hours ago. Furthermore, the bank has frozen your access to every single one of our joint and individual accounts pending a full-scale criminal fraud investigation." Her face went completely, hauntingly pale. The color drained from her cheeks as if someone had opened a high-pressure valve. What are you talking about, Alaric? You're clearly having another episode of confusion." I didn't argue. I simply turned my laptop around so she could see the audio file playing on the screen. Her own voice filled the kitchen, clear, sharp, and unmistakable. "The old man won't know what hit him until it's too late. Once we get the competency ruling signed, everything transfers to me automatically. We just have to keep him groggy." Sonia's hands started shaking visibly, her fingers twitching against the plastic lid of a takeout container. She looked around the kitchen like a cornered animal, like the very walls were closing in and cutting off her escape routes. "That's not. You can't record people without their consent in this state," she stammered, grasping desperately for any legal technicality that might save her. "In my own home, actually, Washington state law allows it under these specific circumstances of criminal activity," I replied, closing the laptop with a deliberate, echoing finality. "The police will be here in exactly 30 minutes. You might want to use that time to call your own lawyer. You're going to need one." For the first time since I'd met her in that coffee shop, Sonia was completely, utterly speechless. The professional mask had shattered. Detective Chun arrived exactly when she had promised, accompanied by Detective Rodriguez from the Financial Crimes Unit. They were professional, thorough, and treated Sonia with far more respect than she'd shown me throughout our entire marriage. Sonia tried desperately to maintain her fading composure, claiming the recordings were taken out of context, that she'd been trying to protect me from my own poor judgment and the predatory people who target vulnerable seniors. But when they played the audio of her discussing forged medical documents with her lawyer accomplice, when they showed her the digital timeline of unauthorized financial transactions I tracked, and when they presented the fake competency evaluation with her handwriting all over the margins, her story fell apart like a poorly designed airframe. "Mrs. Vance," Detective Chun said formally, her voice echoing in the hallway, "you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As they read Sonia her Miranda rights, she looked at me with a terrifying mixture of pure rage and complete disbelief. She couldn't believe that her carefully planned scheme had been discovered and dismantled by the man she thought she had broken. "You don't understand what you've done, Alaric," she said, her voice shaking with anger instead of the fear I'd expected. "You're old. You're lonely. You can't take care of yourself properly. I was helping you. I was taking responsibility for decisions you're not equipped to make anymore." "By stealing from me?" I asked quietly, looking her directly in the eyes. "By taking control of a situation that was only going to get worse," she snapped, her mask finally slipping away to reveal the cold, predatory heart underneath. "Do you know how easy this would have been? How grateful you should have been that someone as young and capable as me still wanted to take care of you." That was the moment I knew with absolute, mathematical certainty that I'd made the right choice. This wasn't the woman I'd married. That woman had never existed. The caring, attentive Sonia had been nothing more than a performance, a high-fidelity simulation designed to gain my trust. Julian arrived just as they were putting Sonia in handcuffs and loading her into the back of the patrol car. He took one look at the flashing blue and red lights, the police presence, and the neighbors watching from their lawns, and he turned around without saying a single word. Detective Rodriguez called after him. They wanted to talk to him as a potential co-conspirator in the fraud scheme. He looked like a ghost as he was led away for questioning. After the police left, I sat in my quiet kitchen, now truly mine again, and called Isla. "It's over," I told her when she answered on the first ring. "Sonia's been arrested for fraud and attempted elder abuse. All the money's safe, The accounts are locked, and she can't touch our legacy anymore." Isla cried with a massive sense of relief on the other end of the phone, the sound of her tears washing away months of tension. "Dad, I'm so incredibly proud of you for fighting back. Mom would be incredibly proud, too. You protected everything you two built together over 40 years. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Perhaps even better than I had since Serafina died. The house felt peaceful instead of empty, secure instead of vulnerable." The legal proceedings took several long months to work their way through the complex court system. Sonia, realizing the evidence against her was insurmountable, eventually pleaded guilty to attempted fraud and financial elder abuse in exchange for a slightly lighter sentence. She received 18 months of probation, 200 hours of community service, and was ordered by the judge to pay $25,000 in immediate restitution for the funds she'd already drained from our shared accounts. Her banking and financial consulting licenses were permanently revoked by the state, which meant she could never work in financial services or handle other people's money ever again. Julian cooperated with the authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence. He received community service, and a strict court order banned him from contacting me for 2 years. I learned from Detective Chun that Sonia had attempted this exact same predatory scheme with 2 other widowed men in the past 5 years. One had caught on early and ended the relationship before she could do significant damage. The other hadn't been so fortunate. She'd successfully isolated him from his family and gained complete control of his finances before his adult son hired a private investigator. "She's a professional predator, Alaric," Detective Chin explained during one of our follow-up meetings at the station. "She specifically targets lonely seniors with substantial assets, specialized pensions, and what she perceives as weak family support systems. You were actually lucky that your daughter stayed involved and kept fighting for you despite Sonia's attempts to push her away." The house felt completely different after Sonia was gone. Quieter, yes, but not empty the way it had been in those first dark months after Serafina died. This was a peaceful quiet, a secure quiet of a fortress reclaimed. I put Serafina's pictures back where they belonged, on the mantel, on the bedside table, in the hallway, and slowly reclaimed my own space, my own routines, and my own sense of total control over my daily life. Isla visited every weekend for 2 months, helping me reorganize everything Sonia had changed, moved, or hidden. We went through all the financial documents together, making sure I understood exactly where every account stood and how to protect myself from any future manipulation. "Dad," Isla said one Saturday morning over fresh coffee in our newly reclaimed kitchen, "I want you to promise me something important. If you ever decide to date again, and I really hope you do someday because you're a wonderful man, please let me meet them first. Not because I don't trust your judgment, but because love and loneliness can make anyone vulnerable to the wrong person. For eyes are better than 2. I promised her I would, but honestly, the idea of opening my life to someone new felt almost impossible at that stage. Sonia had taken more than just money from me. She'd stolen my ability to trust my own instincts about people. She'd damaged my confidence in reading character and motivation. 3 months after the trial ended, I received a thick envelope forwarded through Patricia Wells's law office. The return address showed it was from a women's correctional facility in Oregon where Sonia was serving her community service and reporting for her probation. The letter was handwritten on institutional stationery, 3 pages of careful, flowing script that looked nothing like the confident, aggressive signature Sonia had used when we signed our marriage certificate. "Dear Alaric," it began, "I know you probably don't want to hear from me ever again, and I understand why. But I need to tell you some things that the court proceedings didn't cover, some truths that might help you understand what really happened between us." She went on to claim that her targeting of me hadn't been purely random. She'd methodically researched Boeing and aviation retirees with substantial, guaranteed pensions, looking specifically for recent widowers who seemed socially isolated. She'd known about Serafina's death, about Isla being away at medical school, about my net worth, and about my daily routines before we had ever accidentally met at that coffee shop. "I want you to understand that my feelings for you weren't entirely fake," she wrote, in what felt like one final, desperate manipulation. "I did come to care about you in my own way, but I'd been planning this type of financial scheme for years to support Julian, and I convinced myself that you'd actually be better off with someone professionally managing your assets. The rationalization in her letter was absolutely stunning to read. Even now, facing the legal consequences of her criminal behavior, Sonia was still trying to frame fraud and attempted theft as some kind of caregiving service. But the most disturbing part of the letter was her detailed description of Julian's role. He hadn't been a reluctant participant or an unwilling accomplice. He'd been actively involved from the very beginning in researching my background, my financial situation, and my emotional vulnerabilities. The sullen young man playing video games in my basement had actually been gathering intelligence the entire time, monitoring my conversations and reporting back to his mother. Julian feels terrible about his part in all of this, she wrote, though her description of his behavior suggested he was only sorry they got caught. He's in therapy now, trying to understand why he went along with my plans. We both hope that someday you might find it in your heart to forgive us for the mistakes we made. The letter ended with a request that felt like a final insult. I understand if you can't forgive me right now, but please don't let what I did make you close your heart to finding companionship again. You deserve to be happy, Alaric. You deserve to be loved honestly by someone who genuinely cares about your well-being. I read the letter 3 times, sitting in the silence of my kitchen. Then I sat down and wrote my response. It was much shorter than Sonia's 3-page manifesto. Sonia, I wrote, I received your letter, and I want you to know that I do forgive you. Not because you asked for it, and not because I believe your explanations about trying to help me, but because carrying anger and bitterness toward you would only continue to hurt me. I choose to let go of the rage. I paused there, thinking about what Isla had taught me about the important difference between forgiveness and trust. However, I continued, forgiveness does not mean forgetting what happened, and it certainly does not mean welcoming you or Julian back into my life in any capacity. What you did was calculated, deliberate, and profoundly cruel. You didn't just attempt to steal money. You stole my sense of safety in my own home, my ability to trust my own judgment, and my confidence in my capacity to make good decisions about my own life. I told her about the volunteer work I'd started doing with Detective Chen's unit, sharing my story with other seniors who'd been targeted by similar scams. I told her about the security measures I'd permanently installed and the support group Isla had helped me find. Your actions had consequences that go far beyond your probation, I wrote. But they also had one result you probably didn't anticipate. They made me stronger, more careful, and more determined to protect both myself and other vulnerable people from predators like you. You taught me how to fight. I sealed the letter and walked it to the mailbox myself, raising the red flag with a profound sense of finality. This would be the last communication I'd ever have with Sonia. 6 months later, Isla called with news that filled me with both joy and a protective fear I hadn't expected. Dad, I have something exciting to tell you, she said, her voice bright with happiness. I met someone special. His name is David. He's a resident in pediatric surgery, and I'd really like you to meet him soon. My first instinct was immediate engineering-grade protective concern. After Sonia's betrayal, the idea of anyone new entering our family circle felt potentially dangerous. But as Isla talked about David, his kindness to his patients, his dedication to his training, and his close relationship with his own father, I realized that Sonia's manipulation had actually taught me the most valuable lesson of all. I had finally learned to recognize the difference between the cold, calculated performance of a predator and the genuine, messy, honest heat of real love. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor, and for the first time in a long time, the blueprints for my future looked bright. The boundary between the honest construction of trust and the dark mechanics of psychological exploitation is often invisible until the damage is done. It is the razor-thin line between opening your heart to a partner and unwittingly surrendering your total autonomy to a predator. If you were to uncover a plot by your spouse to systematically dismantle your life and seize every asset you've ever earned, what would be your first move? I invite you to share your perspectives in the comments section below. 2 years had elapsed since Sonia's arrest, and my existence had finally crystallized into a new, healthier rhythm that felt both fundamentally secure and genuinely hopeful. I had integrated myself into a hiking collective for seniors that traversed the mountain trails every Saturday morning, filling my lungs with the crisp, pine-scented air of the Cascades. I also began dedicating my time to the community center's financial literacy program, acting as a mentor for older adults to ensure they never fell into the same traps I had. To keep my mind sharp, I even enrolled in Spanish language courses at the local community college, finding joy in the structured logic of a new grammar. Isla had completed her medical doctorate with high honors and returned to the Seattle area to begin her demanding residency at the Children's Hospital. She brought David to our family dinners every few weeks, and I found myself experiencing a genuine, unforced appreciation for his presence in our lives. David was the antithesis of Julian. He was engaged, profoundly respectful, and exhibited a sincere curiosity regarding my 3 decades of engineering at Boeing. He didn't just nod politely. He asked deep questions about the physics of flight and the stress testing of hydraulic systems. "Alaric, your narratives regarding aircraft architecture are absolutely riveting," he remarked to Isla one evening as we cleared the table. I had no conceptualization of the sheer volume of complex problem-solving required for even the most minute component. I had also ventured back into the world of companionship, moving with extreme caution and with Isla's full, transparent knowledge. I met Catherine Wilson during one of our Saturday treks, a retired primary school educator who had lost her husband to a sudden cardiac event 3 years prior. Catherine possessed a rare, quiet patience. She understood my inherent caution and didn't blink when I insisted on maintaining completely separate financial lives. She respected the boundaries I had built to protect my peace. "Trust is a structure that must be rebuilt brick by brick after a collapse," she said softly when I finally confided in her about Sonia's profound betrayal. "I am not going anywhere, Alaric. We can calibrate the speed of this relationship to whatever pace you require for your own comfort." Perhaps the most significant transformation, however, was the collaborative work I had initiated with Detective Sarah Chun and the Financial Crimes Division. They had requested that I serve as a peer counselor for other fraud survivors, helping them process the crushing realization that being deceived by a professional does not equate to being weak, unintelligent, or senile. Predators like Sonia are highly trained psychological specialists. I would explain to the support groups, looking into eyes filled with the same shame I once carried. They don't just guess. They study human behavior with clinical precision. They weaponize our noblest instincts, our longing for connection, our capacity for empathy, and our fundamental desire to believe that those we love truly care for us. Being targeted by a professional of that caliber is not a reflection of your intellect. It is a testament to the fact that you still have a heart worth protecting. One afternoon, while I was performing my monthly audit of my bank statements, a meticulous habit I had vowed never to abandon, I discovered a certified envelope waiting in my mailbox. The sight of the return address caused a familiar, involuntary tightening in my chest. It was from Sonia's defense attorney. Inside was a singular, formal notification that would provide the final, mechanical closure to this dark chapter. The courthouse was more intimate and understated than I had anticipated, lacking the grand, theatrical flourishes often depicted in legal dramas. Sonia sat at the defense table, clad in a standard-issue orange jumpsuit that clashed violently with the image of the polished banker I had married. Her once impeccably styled golden hair was now pulled back into a utilitarian ponytail. She looked aged, worn down by the friction of the legal system, yet she showed no visible remorse when she briefly glanced toward the gallery where I sat. Sonia had flagrantly violated the strict terms of her probation. She had constructed a fraudulent dating profile and attempted to solicit another elderly widower through a digital matchmaking platform. Fortunately, the man's daughter had discovered the suspicious communications and alerted the authorities before any financial damage could be inflicted. Sonia was now being remanded to serve the remainder of her original sentence behind bars. When Judge Martinez summoned my name to deliver a victim impact statement, I approached the witness stand with a stack of prepared notes, but as I looked out at the room, I found myself discarding the script. I spoke from the raw, honest center of my experience. "Your Honor," I began, my voice remaining as steady as a calibrated instrument. Sonia Vance did not merely attempt to misappropriate my capital or my physical property. She attempted to steal something far more essential to my identity. She targeted my ability to trust my own internal compass, my sense of sanctuary within my own home, and my confidence in my ability to govern my own life. I described for the court the grueling months of self-doubt that had haunted me, the way I had questioned every decision I had made since Serafina's passing, and the burning humiliation of that day in the restaurant. While she publicly proclaimed me to be mentally deficient, she attempted to transform me into a caricature of a foolish, helpless old man. I continued. She nearly persuaded me that I deserved to have my agency stripped away, but she failed. I talked about the resilience I had discovered in the process of fighting back, and the satisfaction of knowing that my struggle was now helping to safeguard other seniors in our community. Sonia is exceptionally skilled at identifying and mining human vulnerability, I said, locking eyes with her for the first time. But she made one fatal miscalculation. She confused my loneliness with weakness. She thought a heart that was hurting was a heart that was hollow. She was wrong. I concluded by expressing my hope that she would use her time in incarceration to contemplate the true human cost of her actions, the psychological wreckage that extends far beyond the numbers on a balance sheet. Judge Martinez sentenced her to 2 years in the county jail. As the bailiffs led her away, she looked back at me one last time. I couldn't decipher the expression on her face. Anger, regret, or perhaps just another layer of calculation, and I realized with a sudden, light feeling that I no longer cared to try. Isla was waiting for me in the corridor, flanked by Catherine and David. Detective Chun shook my hand firmly. Your testimony was vital, Alaric. Your case has helped us refine our entire investigative protocol for elder abuse. You've turned a personal tragedy into a public service. That evening, at my specific request, we dined at Luigi's. I wanted to overwrite the memory of public shaming with a new memory of family, strength, and reclamation. Catherine raised her glass in a toast. To Alaric, she said, for proving that while dignity can be temporarily displaced, it can never truly be stolen. Isla and David laughed, but I saw the shimmer of pride in my daughter's eyes. I'm so proud of you, Dad, she whispered. Mom would be absolutely stunned by the strength you've shown. As we departed the restaurant into the cool Seattle night, I thought about the letter Sonia had sent me from jail, her claim that she had been protecting me. The truth was the exact opposite. By trying to destroy me, she had inadvertently forged me into something stronger. My phone buzzed with a notification as we reached the cars. For a split second, my heart rate spiked, an old reflex of hypervigilance. But it was merely a confirmation for my Spanish class the next morning. Catherine and I were planning a journey to Spain for her 70th birthday, our first real vacation together. I smiled and tucked the phone away. At 67, I was finally mastering the balance between being appropriately cautious and refusing to live in fear. 3 weeks later, I received one final communication from Sonia. The envelope was thick, suggesting a long-winded plea or a final attempt at gaslighting. I held it for a moment, remembering the weight of her previous words. Then, without breaking the seal, I walked to my office and fed the envelope directly into the paper shredder. I watched the steel teeth transform her final manipulation into meaningless confetti. Some dialogues are finished. Some stories have reached their natural terminus. Some individuals have forfeited their right to occupy space in your mind. Healing doesn't always require a grand confrontation. Sometimes, it is as simple as refusing to participate in someone else's attempt to control your narrative. I walked out to the garden. Serafina's roses were in full, vibrant bloom, healthier than they had been in a decade. The afternoon sun was warm on my skin as I worked the soil, my hands steady and my mind clear. Behind me, my home was secure. My legacy was protected. My daughter was thriving. As the sun began to set over the Puget Sound, painting the sky in shades of copper and violet, I sat on my deck with a cup of coffee and my laptop. I was putting the finishing touches on a presentation for the senior center. I was writing about the importance of trusting your intuition and the vital difference between healthy skepticism and paranoid isolation. When my phone rang, Isla's name lit up the screen. Dad, I have the most wonderful news, she said, her voice radiant. David proposed. We're engaged. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated joy. For the first time, my protective instinct didn't feel like fear. It felt like love. "Tell me everything," I said, leaning back in my chair. As she described the proposal, a quiet, sincere moment in the hospital garden, I realized that Sonia's betrayal had given me a final, unexpected gift. I now knew exactly what real love looked like because I had seen its opposite. I could distinguish between a partner who wants to share your life and a predator who wants to consume it. David had proven his character through 2 years of consistent, reliable action. He had never pushed, never isolated, and never manipulated. "Dad," Isla said, "I want you to walk me down the aisle. I want you to know that the way you loved Mom is the standard I used to find David." After we hung up, I sat in the gathering twilight, thinking of Serafina and how proud she would be of us both. We had protected what we built. If this story resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe and join our community. We share stories every week of ordinary people finding extraordinary strength. And remember, it is never, ever too late to reclaim your dignity and protect your future.